Welcome to Melody Makers, where we discuss arranging and composing and meet the real melody makers behind the music of Melody's traditional music, folkharp.com, and Afghan press music for the harp. I'm Gretchen Munson, harpist, pianist, organist, and arranger, and your host for today. In today's episode, we have a special guest with us. Stephanie Curcio was introduced to the harp in the middle of the thriving mid-century New York City music world. She studied with Lucille Lawrence and Carlos Salcedo before embarking on her own long career of teaching. Before we chat with Stephanie, let's get a taste of her beautiful work. This is Enchanted Heart from the Heart Suite, performed by one of Stephanie's students, Emily Richardson. The piece was composed for Stephanie's husband on the occasion of their 35th wedding anniversary. Do you remember about the first time you ever saw or heard a harp?
Well, my father had a hobby. He would carve little instruments out of, cigar boxes and stuff like that, because you have to remember, back in the late 40s, early 50s, they didn't have TV and stuff like that. And so this was his hobby. He was making this particular harp for my mother. I don't know why, but I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It really could be slightly tuned, and it had the little 7 pedals and the gold and everything. And I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. So came time to go into high school. I was already a very accomplished pianist because I started when I was 5. And I had to take a second instrument. Now, they wanted me to play the bass, which my father played, and no way. I wanted to play the harp, and they had a harp at the High School of Music and Art in New York. It's a very famous school. So I started harp lessons. They were group lessons. They were with the original harpist to the Fantastics. She was a terrible teacher, but a good harpist. Well, one of the girls there studied with Carlos Salcedo. And I wanted to really study the instrument. I loved it. I loved even that little bit that I had of it. And so she got me an interview with Salcedo. And I was a very poor kid. I could never afford, in those days, now this is 1952, $25 an hour. That was insane. So he sent me to Lucille Lawrence, and that was the beginning of everything.
Wow. So you studied with Lucille Lawrence. So share some reflections on your studies with her. What were the most important things she taught you? What do you remember?
Well, I love Lucille. She was my second mother, no question. She gave me innumerable opportunities, but she was obsessed to the point of insanity with Carlos Salcedo, his technique, and everything that he came to offer to the world. Now, he was an incredible, very innovative person, okay? But I have said this before, and people, bristle, but he was also very cultist. My way or no way, Jose. So primarily, Lucille worked on technique, the hands, the elbows, the raising. Now, the raising in my day was a very beautiful thing. The story goes, Salcedo was backstage for the Firebird when Nijinsky came by, the great ballet dancer, and said to him, "You play the most beautiful instrument in the world. Why don't you let your hands express that? Because in the European technique, you stayed still." And so that's how the raise began. It was expressive of the music. It filled the spaces between things. It was not a technique unto itself, but it became that over time. Because all the fighting, people go, "Oh, this is ridiculous, it's stupid." And it got bigger and bigger and stupider, for a period of time there. But that was the idea. So she was very technique-oriented and very raise-oriented in terms of expressing the music. But she gave me innumerable opportunities. I was a very poor kid. I didn't have a harp. At some point, she sent me to a woman named Marie Miller, again, a very well-known harpist. She was married to a movie producer, and she lived in an apartment on Fifth Avenue with a sunken living room. I had never seen anything like that, okay? And I went with my father because we was going to retire, and her smaller harp, which was like a semi-grand, she wanted to give to a student who would use it well. And I was that student. Miss Lawrence sent me to her, and I played for her, and I interviewed with her. She gave me not only the harp for whatever my father could afford, but she gave me at the same time a collection I have in the other room of miniatures and pictures for harp. She gave me music stand and seat, the bird's eye maple that Lyon and Healy used to make. And she gave me her entire library of music, which was incredible. I brought it back to Lucille, who said, "Burn it, it's junk." Because it was a lot of European stuff. Things, terrible pieces like Tournier, Renier, Hasselman. Of course I didn't. But I did try playing it with the Salcedo technique, and it did not sound good. Because the Salcedo technique was designed for large sound, projection, drama. The music of the French school then was more flowing and beautiful, and it needed more of a flowing hand, more of a different, and I looked into that after a while and tried playing with that, and suddenly the music came alive.
What a great description of the two differences between the two technique schools. Yeah,
Well,
'cause
there's place for both.
Yeah.
I mean, technique is not a goal unto itself. And that's the problem that had existed for years. It's pretty much gone now. But now there's no technique at all in a lot of the students, But the point is that if you want a certain kind of sound, you play a certain way. If you want a different sound, you play a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. So then, after your studies with Lucille Lawrence, or maybe during, you would go spend summers at the Camden Harp Colony with one summer. Okay.
One summer.
With
I did
Salcedo.
study on and off. I would go to Salcedo when I had a piece of music in, good condition and advanced, and I would have occasional lessons with him. But I did go to the summer harp colony. Now, you asked me what I remember. Well, Salcedo, as I said, was very cultist. And what he would do with us is he had a long, long room at the Camden home. And he would line us students all up along the wall once a week. And he would have somebody play. And then he would go down the line of students and ask for our opinions on the playing of that student. And almost all the students, oh, she was wonderful. Oh, yes, wonderful. To me, this girl, I do not remember her name. It was too many years ago. But she played perfectly well. Her technique was fine. Her notes were accurate. But she played like a robot. Because Salcedo never allowed for the individuality or the musicianship of an individual player. You had to play it his way, his interpretation. And an interesting extension of that is I had a student play the Chanson de la Nuit in a competition many years later. 2 of the 3 judges were non-Salcedo. They thought it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever heard because she played it as the music spoke to her. And if you do that with a lot of Salcedo's works, it does speak to you differently than he determines that it should be. The Salcedo judge said it was the worst rendition she'd ever heard. So to go back to the Camden colony, when he got to me, he asked me, what did I think? And I said, you don't want to know. And he said, oh, yes, I do. So I said, she plays accurately, technically well, but she sounds like a robot. There's no expression. There's no musical sensitivity. And surprisingly, the heavens did not open and the lightning did not happen.
Well, he asked for your opinion.
Well, the upshot of that is I stayed for 6 out of the 8 weeks, and then I left because I was preparing for my college baccalaureate concert, and I couldn't work with him well. I just needed to go home and continue with Lucille because there was no room for any part of my musicianship. However, the upshot of this all is he accompanied me on that baccalaureate concert for the Debussy dances. That was at Carnegie Recital Hall in New York.
Wow.
He used to scream at us all the time, never, never, never let the pianist use the loud pedal or anything like that. They'll bury you. Let me tell you, he tried, but I played my heart out and it worked out. Okay. But he did not stay off the loud pedal.
Wow, that is so funny. So after you graduated, then you went on to teach for many, many years. So what have some of your experiences been teaching? What are your favorite moments?
Well, it turns out that I am a born teacher. I love it. I find the idea of taking young talent and developing is just very rewarding. I've had some interesting experiences. I have been blessed with, I can't tell you how many really gifted students. One of my gifted students, for instance, is the harpist to the San Francisco Ballet and has been for years. As I moved along, I eventually decided to try competitions with the students, and I took 2 of the girls out to, I think it was San Antonio. And this was when I was not one of the big top teachers in the country. And so the attitude was, who do you think you are? So I had told the girls, when you go in, do not refer to me, don't talk to me, don't anything. I'll be there for you, okay? But do not say anything until afterwards. which was to their advantage because there was a lot of antagonism. I mean, I was a newcomer, and what right did I have? And they did fine. They didn't win, but they placed, okay? And they were fine. And that was how I got started with that. And I've enjoyed doing competitions as long as the student really wanted to do it, because I warn them in advance, this is not going to be easy. I'm going to ask a huge amount of you, but you can stop me at any time and tell me you don't want to do this anymore. Fine by me. Most of them, all but one, went through. And my Annie from the San Francisco Ballet won, I think it was the first young artist, when they started that young professional, and she sort of reigned, so to say, for 2 years. She won that position.
And then when you taught at the university level also, right?
Yeah, but University of New Hampshire, I mean, it's my state, it's the university here, but this is not their strong point, music. And I never really had majors at the University of New Hampshire. I had always said the only real thing that I had wished I could do is to graduate a harp major from a harp program. But I hadn't had that opportunity, except I am coming up on 87, okay? And Emily Richardson is at Wellesley as a harp major, a double major. And Wellesley, even though they have a teacher, but Emily's just too advanced, they've okayed the fact that I'm her teacher, and she will be graduating this year as a harp major, and that will fulfill that last, so to say, bucket list item in harp for me.
Oh, how special. Aside from all the teaching and the performing and the fantastic experiences you've had, you also are an arranger and composer.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about what prompted that first arrangement or composition.
I was taking a composition class, and now you have to remember, so I went into high school at 52, so maybe 54, okay, 1954. I was in a composition class, and there was a contest in New York for young composers. It happens all the time, every year. And I decided to set 3 poems to voice and harp. One of them was the Harp of Sorrow, and they were sort of toward the modern side, but not completely. And one was a song that my uncle had written that I set for harp, and I don't remember what the third, and the third one was just a modality I thought was very pretty. So I entered these 3 pieces, and I came in 3rd in New York City. This is a very interesting thing because my students just find it hard to believe me. But as big an accomplishment and an honor as that was, the teachers ignored the heck out of me after that. I was a female. Females don't do that back then. So what happened is I kind of got nipped in the bud at that point, and I just didn't do very much after that. But you can't stop it if you have it. So I started setting things. I remember setting the cadenza from Lucia and playing it at one of the big opera singers' houses. I would just arrange things because I liked them, and there were none for harp. And so by the end of, I was in college. Miss Lawrence, when she came out with the book Solos for Harp Players, I had done a piece by Turina called Zarabanda, and I had transcribed it for harp. Very pretty thing. And she liked it, so she included it in the book. And the problem was, in those days, books, and there was no computerizing books. They were sent to Europe and they were typeset with these huge machines. And I was never given the roughs to edit or whatever. So the Zarabanda, as printed in the solo for the harp player, had a lot of problems. Okay. So I've reprinted it since, and I have it in Stephanie Curcio publications. But that was the first. After that, it just came anytime. There was nothing to give my students. There was very little music that was playable and enjoyable. And that has really been my arranging and composing goal over the years. Not to create symphonies and, big concertos or stuff like that, but to create music for people to enjoy, for students to have, to play, to grow with. And I have now a catalog of over 100 pieces.
Fantastic. And they are sweet and dear to many of our hearts.
Oh, thank you.
So nice. And you also wrote a book about your experiences and life as a harpist called The American Harpist. So tell us about that process.
There it is. Well, so many of the things you're asking me about are in here. The thing that I became aware of well into my career is that I was very fortunate to be part of the earliest development of the harp culture in the United States. There were harpists before Salcedo and Grosjean. They were brought in from Europe. They played with the orchestras. They did concerts, things like that. But there was no harp culture. There was nobody teaching regularly. There was, here and there. But when Salcedo and Grosjean immigrated to the United States, they started an entire, and the best word I can use is culture of the harp. They were teaching, they were developing players. They went to war with each other because of their techniques. I met them one time. Salcedo introduced me to Grosjean at some composers meeting in New York. I will never forget that as long as I live. Big, tall Grosjean, a little bitty Salcedo, shaking hands, the big bare paw and the little paw, shaking hands. You could, right there, you could see. This was not, something made in heaven. But they were always polite, which is why students over the years who have asked me about the history of these people find it very hard to believe that they were at war with each other. Because in those days and in the European traditions, politeness is major. And they were always polite. Unlike today. Not in the harp world. Anyway, it is very interesting because it is the early world of harp. And I knew all the biggies in New York. Mildred Dilling, for instance, when my parents eventually got me a harp at the end of college as a gift, my mother went to an auction in New York where a young man, and I do not know what his name is, I never did, had died very young, and he had a harp, a gold Lyman Healy 23. I don't remember who he was, but it was only a few years old, and it was auctioned. And Mildred Dilling had a collection of so many harps because she just did that. She had unlimited money. My mother didn't have unlimited money. My father went through the roof when she came home, but she outbid Mildred Dilling on this harp. And that was my first gold harp.
Oh, wow. What a fascinating story. What would you say are the biggest differences between the harp scene in New York at that time and the harp scene now?
For, so many years until I've had to retire. Lyman Healy liked to say that Stephanie Curcio owned New England. And I did in a way, because I had so many of the students and the harps and all the rest of it, and I was very much on top of that. And I worked very hard to develop students who either were loving and enjoying what they did and playing for the love of it, or if they were serious, training very hard for things like competitions, or my students have gone to everything, Juilliard, all the big ones. They've, been with Condé Nast, they've been with, everybody. Because I couldn't give them that at the University of New Hampshire, we just didn't have that kind of a level of music programs. This is so much a part of American culture now. Parents and students seem to want to be able to just play and enjoy it and have a good time. But nothing in this world that you want to do well, no matter at what level you want to do it, okay, can be done without putting in the effort and learning from others. This is an interesting thing I can close with for this. Once upon a time, there used to be a thing called a harp list on the internet. And a group of us across the country would sort of monitor it, just in case anything insane was said. And somebody said one time, I don't see the point of having a teacher. I have to drive to the teacher. I have to drive home, and I'm wasting all that time that I could have been practicing. Teachers are useless. So I piped up and said, well, I'm sure that if you'd like to go back to primitive times when people first learned the harp, and you worked on your own and you tried to be, inventive, that would be just fine. But you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of experience that you can be given through a teacher. And it would seem to me a real shame to throw that away. And I think that's pretty much my philosophy, Have a goal and work at it. And put in the labor. No matter at what level, every different levels for different people.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your harp journey with us today. It's
You're
been
welcome.
So exciting.
And Buy American Harpist.
Yes.
It will tell you all about it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. All of Stephanie's pieces and her autobiographical book, American Harpist, are available on Melodies at folkharp.com. To close, we have another recording by Emily. Butterflies was composed for Emily to perform at the Audubon Society's Butterfly release, honoring children who have passed from severe illnesses. Thank you for listening today. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Share the Melody Makers podcast with your family, friends, and all the harp teachers you know. On behalf of Melody's Traditional Music and Afghan Press Music for the Harp, this is Gretchen Munson wishing you a joyful, music-filled day.